Hello, my name is Carlos Bonell, and I'm going to be speaking to you about learning processes and techniques and ways of approaching learning and developing your guitar playing as an adult, as opposed to starting to play when you're a child. Now, some of you may have played as children and as young people and now have returned to playing the guitar much later in life. This is very, very frequent, and often there is a great shyness about that, as if it's something, an embarrassment, but not at all. I think it's wonderful, wonderful that we return to that love of music and love of playing the guitar after many years of not doing so. But there are obviously things that one has to be very careful with, which I'm going to discuss. As far as adult learners, I am an adult learner too, because on the basis that we all continue to learn and to develop our playing, I can assure you that everybody, right up to the last moment that they play their instrument, feel genuinely that they are making progress in getting better at what they do, and that includes me. So we're all in the same boat from that point of view. Adult learners could be some people from any age onwards, from 35, 40. What are the advantages of being an adult learner? Maybe you didn't expect me to say that. The advantages of being an adult learner, a quick summary, is that as an adult learner, as an adult, you develop a greater patience, a greater determination, and importantly, a greater analytical sense of what you're doing and how to improve it. These are tremendous advantages over the more impetuous youth that maybe you too were once. And now that you've actually stabilized into being a more measured, if that's the right word, a more measured adult. Disadvantages of being an adult learner, again, a big overview here, are that maybe you feel that you've slowed down in your fingers, and that might be true. That it takes longer to learn, the actual process of learning takes longer, not necessarily. That the process of memorizing also slows down. That probably is true. So it's a mixed bag of things that you have to do. Let me give you an example of what can happen and what is the difference between an adult learner and maybe when you were much younger, or even if you're beginning to play the guitar. One is to take more time on the warming up. If I do something like basic slurring exercise like that, rather than hurry immediately, it's much better and wiser as we get older to take time and ease your way into that. And that goes also for the general attitude towards the development of creating a calm atmosphere for yourself when you play. I will give you some exercise on that as well a bit later on. So I mentioned the slurring. Think of yourself, think also of the right hand technique, very simple. No left hand. Some of you may find that you do not need to warm up, but if you feel that it's wise to do so, do take time, and do take more time than you think is absolutely strictly necessary. Resist the idea, especially from cold, of going straight into difficult arpeggio, for example. No, don't do that. Take your time to actually build up into that. So generally, a little bit more cautious in your approach to the warming up and getting into the playing. I think that's the important advice I can offer you straight away now. The greatest challenge to an adult learner is to learn in such a way that you do not get tense and you do not make stress on the hands and the fingers in such a way that you cause problems of tendonitis or related to tendonitis. By the way, this also happens with much younger players as well. But with older people, as we know, it takes longer to actually recover from such things. So that's very important. That is my overview of the process of adult learners. Now I'm going to go into more detail. I'm going to talk to you now about how you could plan your practice. The important consideration, I think, for adult learners is that you now know yourselves a lot better than you did a few years ago. That's hopefully what we've actually learned. So you know something about the way your mind and your concentration works. So there is no, in my opinion, hard and fast rule about how you should practice. You should practice according to your own way of being. What do I mean by that? Some people have a great capacity to concentrate uninterruptedly for, say, 20-25 minutes and get to terms with a task they have set themselves technically without interruption. Other people, and which I count myself, are a little bit more scatterbrained and therefore cannot concentrate exclusively on anything for more than a few minutes at a time. There's nothing wrong with either of those approaches. It's simply what suits you best. The important thing is to actually create an idea of what you have to do. There has to be some aspect of technical development in your playing, otherwise you won't actually improve in the long run. There has to be some aspect also of enjoyment of the music. And there has to be some aspect also of an understanding and developing an understanding of the music. And that's another aspect of the development of adult learning, which is interesting for you because many of you will be very interested in other aspects, the harmonic development, the shape of the piece, the historical and social background. That's all part of giving tremendous weight to your performance when you get round to actually playing those pieces, because you'll have a whole bank of information behind you. So the actual procedure of the practice is that we talk about this slowly developing the fingers' agility. What are the three aspects? Chord playing, arpeggios, and single note playing. I mean, that really sums up all guitar technique, and then there are a few extras, which are just extras. Even the great fascination of the tremolo is actually an arpeggio on one string. One string. So that's a little digression there. The important thing, therefore, is to actually try to refer to each of these aspects. Slurring technique as well maybe is one which is important by itself, and I did start on that because that's a good way of warming up. Notice what I've already done there is change position, so that brings in two elements, the slur, then going up. Do it slowly, do it carefully, don't do it too quickly at the beginning, and also think of the rhythm. Not, unless of course it's deliberate. That's a little detail. Chord playing. You could actually make up your own chord sequence, even familiar chords, C major, A minor, D minor, G7. C major, A minor, D minor, G7. The basis of Western music even. Did I hear you say that's not Western music? It is Western music, even though it's from the 1950s, as you know, that particular rhythmic sequence. So that's arpeggios, which can also be played as chords. What are you looking for in chords as well in the warm-up? Technical development, tone, accuracy, balance in the voicing. And that leads us to how you actually start to do your practice in terms of the detail of where do you actually start. I mentioned the possibility of the slurring, I mentioned the possibility of the chords, and I mentioned the possibility of arpeggios. So how to divide your time in the practice. Let's imagine that you've decided you've got 1 hour to do the practice and you think to yourself, what am I going to do? The approximate balance I would suggest would be 20 minutes in which you focus on technical matters like a study or a particular aspect of technique, whether it be slurring or the tremolo or whatever you happen to be working on, and the rest of the time for the music. If you have 2 hours, it might be slightly different. I think that we're all different. So therefore, you may find it more useful to think, I'll now spend a few minutes doing some slurring exercises, then I will play through a piece. Or you may decide, I'm now going to spend 10 minutes on the slurring and then spend 20, 30 minutes on a piece. How you divide your time is up to you, but the important thing is that actual technical issues have to be tackled directly. If you spend a few minutes, even just a few minutes, tackling those technical issues, scales, for example, the arpeggios, by specifically concentrating on them, you will get a much better result from your practice. So I am now sitting down, imagining I've got a few hours ahead of me. You know, it's going to have no time restrictions. We'll talk about that in a minute, time restrictions. I've got some time. But the important thing is to get myself into a good frame of mind, as relaxed as possible. So rather than doing scales and arpeggios straight away, I like to do some sort of improvising. Now, not everybody can do some improvising. So I also wrote a tiny little fragment. Basically, as you can hear, it's a sort of Baroque type cadence, but that gets me into much better spirits than going, which is great, and it's very gratifying if one can do that without any warming up, of course. But the other one gets you into a really relaxed frame of mind and sets up a much more relaxed way in the hands and the arms to actually then develop into the more demanding technique. So that's what I would suggest. That little fragment is in a book, The Will of Perfection, published by Mel Bay, in which I talk about all these aspects, of course in the book, in writing, with the exercises written out. After having done that, I would just play that. I'll play it again if you like. Okay, what shall I do now? Some of you eagle-eyed about that will know that comes from a Giuliani study. That's already going too fast, I should have kept it slower. So I've just got up, I'm just going to do the practice now, that's why. So I'm just pretending I'm doing that for you. A few simple arpeggios like that, then you might think to yourself, okay, most beautiful exercise I find and really relaxing is to pick up on the idea of the chord. Now this is a chord of C major, C on the 5th string, 3rd string G, C on the 2nd string, E on the top string. Now listen to this. Now listen to this. This. All right, so you think, what am I doing? As you can hear it, there's a difference in the voicing of the chord. This is a wonderful way to get into a really good mood with your practice, because it's really bringing together not just the right hand technique, which is the delicate hand, as you know, it's also bringing listening carefully into what you're doing. All music demands perfect voicing. In fact, I would argue that you are drawn into good playing by immediately hearing the perfect voicing. In other words, the tune stands out as it should do. The accompaniment recedes from the tune, and there's a perfect balance, rather like in a painting you have foreground and background. It's the same with music, as well as naturally a good tone, which is what this gives you an opportunity to do. If I now add a sequence to that, D minor, G, I think you can do that yourselves, and you begin to think, okay, I want to bring out that tune. Into something which sounds vaguely like Handel suddenly. Where did that come from? So I hope that's given you some idea how you could build up a relaxed way into the actual schedule of the practice. Getting into the right mindset for the practice comes from these exercises, including the relaxed way of the chord sequences. It's important to actually think that you actually calm down from the day's activities unrelated to guitar playing. When you're an adult, you've got lots more concerns in your mind, not least maybe even worries, and you think of music as being an escape from maybe a reality that you have, which is an adult reality. But for that, it's good to find a way into that peace of mind, a way into being relaxed. And the chord sequences and the improvisation will all help. The difference between being an adult and being a youngster quickly gets over this, and youngsters often thrive on tension. I teach at the Royal College of Music, and I know the young students there don't mind playing with a lot of tension, but it's not a good thing to do that when you're adult, because your mind is quite different. I've talked about the importance of technical development, but there are moments, say for example, if you have limited time during the day to practice, when you don't feel like doing it, and that's fine too. If you want to go straight into the pieces, Lagrima by Tariga, which is not difficult. As I say, don't do immediately very difficult pieces, but if you feel today you don't want to do any technical development, that's good. If on the other hand you get up and you think, you know, I've got to break the back of the tremolo, I must get that right, and you want to spend an hour doing the tremolo, that's good too. Maybe this is a reflection of the way I am, which I'm not a completely rigidly organized person. I think it's a combination both of application to the problems and also allowing the natural curiosity, interest and spontaneity of the way we wish to play music to also have an important factor in the way we organize our time. There is an ideal. The ideal is that you do a balance of technical development and music and reading and research. That balance is for everyone to discover, but approximately, I would say, technical development should take a quarter or a third of the time, which inevitably it will if you're learning a piece, because if you keep on practicing a phrase, which you find difficult, that in itself is part of your technical development. So to sum up, it's important to have a balance in your practice and your playing, which is that between enjoyment and development and improvement. Now, that's a lot of things I've just mentioned. You have to find that balance. You have to feel free to explore, and that's a great advantage at the stage that we're at, especially if you're not a dedicated professional. Or you're free to explore what you wish to do in terms of the music, in terms of the technique, how to combine them, and how much time to spend on one or the other or a combination. So it's an individual recipe which I will actually strongly advise you to follow. If you need to have strong guidance on that, obviously a teacher will actually help you on that, but you yourselves will know what technical aspect needs developing and when you want to apply yourself to it. It doesn't have to be every day, but it can be some of the day, and it can be obsessive too. The more obsessive type temperament will actually get an idea and keep at it until they get it right, and that's good too. So really the summary is to feel free in your attitude to the music, not feel that you have to fulfill any prescribed notions, but that you find your own way of accommodating the practice in terms of improvement and enjoyment.